A judge sides with a former governor over the state's ethics commission and puts the future of the organization in question. We'll hear from an expert on what the future could be for ethics in state government. Hello and welcome to Empire State Weekly. I'm John Gray in Albany. A state Supreme Court judge has ruled that New York's ethics commission is unconstitutional. The ruling stems from a lawsuit filed by former Governor Andrew Cuomo. Now, that commission on ethics and lobbying in government has been trying to force Cuomo to forfeit $5 million, which he received for writing a book about his administration's efforts during the COVID-19 pandemic. However, a judge now ruling that the commission violates the state's constitution because of how it was created and given enforcement powers without the constitutional amendment that would have required a vote of the people. The commission responding to this ruling and saying in part, "We respectfully disagree with the court's result and are reviewing all options, including, if appropriate, interim legislation." Joining us now is Blair Horner of the New York Public Interest Research Group to give us some additional insight into all this. Blair, first of all, welcome to the show. You and I go back a long, long way, too long probably. Before we get into what's going on with the Ethics Commission now and the judge, for those who don't follow this stuff as closely as you and I might, a little background. First, we had J. Cope, right? Talk a little bit with J. Cope and what happened to J. Cope before we get to where we are now.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just take it one page back further.
Yeah.
In the olden days, John, when you were young, there was something called the State Ethics Commission, which under Governor Eliot Spitzer then became the Commission on Public Integrity, which then under Governor Cuomo became the Joint Commission on Public Ethics. So,
which was J. Cope.
Which was J. Cope. And so that entity was created, again, under Governor Cuomo, and it was roundly derided as not effective and independent because the officers of the commission were appointed directly by the governor and the legislative leaders. And so that crashes and burns. There's all sorts of stories, which we could talk about if you'd like. But then Governor Hochul comes in and says, J. Cope has to go. I want to replace something with something that's independent. And so that's where we start with this story with the judge. And one of the ways, laudable, I think, in the governor's intention, was to create an ethics commission that she said would be independent by having the law school deans vet the candidates instead of directly being appointed by the governor or the attorney general, that the law school deans would say, okay, we'll take your nominees, we'll vet them. If they pass muster, then they go on the commission.
And one of the, not to go back in history too much, but one of the issues, you just sort of brushed by it a little bit, with J. Cope, if I recall, it seemed like some of the investigations were getting closer and closer to the second floor of the Capitol, and then it seemed like maybe we don't need this stuff anymore. Right. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, that's very fair. Unfortunately, the Joint Commission, when it operated, was supposed to do all of its discussions in secret when it came to investigations. Somehow, one of their secret discussions about one of the top aides to former Governor Cuomo got back to former Governor Cuomo. He calls the Assembly Speaker complaining that his appointees, the Speaker's appointees, were not towing the party line. No one ever figured out how Governor Andrew Cuomo found out about it.
Right.
And it did show, though, that the leaders had their thumbs on their commission appointees.
So that gets disbanded. Kathy Hochul comes along, or now this new commission, was this Cuomo as well, or was this Kathy Hochul's
This
commission?
is the one that exists now is all from the governor, the current governor.
Right.
She promised to blow up J. Cope, the words that she used.
Right.
And she did, and there's a new commission now in place called the Commission on Ethics and Lobbying in Government.
So they have these deans of colleges. They look at the people to vet them to figure out who's kosher, who's not, maybe in somebody's back pocket. They then get a big grenade dumped in their lap with the book deal of Cuomo. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, one of the issues that came up that really showed how the Joint Commission that existed under Cuomo was really not terribly independent was Governor Cuomo gets a book deal worth $5 million. It was his second book deal. They approved, the staff approved it. It doesn't even go to the commission members. And part of the deal was, first of all, he's the highest paid governor in the country. Why should he have an outside book deal in the first place? But let's put that aside for the moment. Right. The deal was that he couldn't use public resources in writing the book. He could do it, on the weekends or in his feety pajamas at night while he's typing away. And turns out, according to the Joint Commission, the former ethics agency, that he did. And they argued that, in fact, that was a violation and they wanted to claw the money back. That issue is what triggered the lawsuit that brought the judge in this week. And in that decision, he cites the law school deans. But what's really making it all happen is the new commission started to look at the book deal too. Governor Cuomo wants to keep the $5 million.
And talk about this decision now. It sort of strikes right at the Ethics Commission, correct? It's saying you don't have the jurisdiction to be doing these things?
Yeah, there's a number of different arguments the judge brings up, but fundamentally, basically the judge is arguing that the Governor Hochul, can't cede authority to some other entity. And so when she created this new commission, which was approved by the legislature and is now law, the law school deans shouldn't have any authority to decide who's on the commission, who's not. It really should be up to the governor. That's fundamentally the argument. And therefore, it's unconstitutional,
right.
Therefore can't enforce the law, therefore Governor Cuomo gets to keep the $5 million.
Now, it would seem there's two train tracks here she could take. One is appeal to the Court of Appeals. This was state Supreme Court that got
right.
knocked. You go to the highest court, maybe you get a different decision, or do you bring the legislature back and do you pass a law? I mean, I don't know if there's any wiggle room here at all to go back after this book money, or if now that ship sailed. Well,
in terms of what the government's going to do, it's been reported that they will appeal. And typically what happens when the government appeals a decision, the decision is stayed. So then we'll see what happens, right? I mean, the legislature is supposedly not in town until January. If the court rules in favor and consistent with the judge's decision, that blows up ethics enforcement in New York, and then the legislature and the governor are back to the drawing board. If they overturn the judge's decision, then you'll have whatever kind of system is in place, but it certainly delays any action against the governor's book deal, and it could delay it substantially if they have to go back to the drawing board.
Well, if they don't fix this in some way, then this commission is useless, right? I mean, they have to do something, because the next case that comes along, if I'm in trouble, I'm going to make the same case. You guys don't have the authority to touch me.
The enforcement part of the current commission is certainly in doubt because of the judge's decision. But again, if they get a stay, they technically can continue to do the work. I mean, the Ethics Commission has authority over the executive branch, a little bit over the legislative branch, but also over the incredibly large lobbying community, right? So they have a lot of regulatory authority on the issues. But if they're going to bring a penalty, you're right. If you're the lawyer for the person who's receiving the penalty or whatever, you can certainly challenge that, citing this decision.
Last question. You've been doing this decades, the same way but you're inside the baseball lines with the Capitol. Do you lose your mind when you look and see, after all these years, is it getting better? Is it getting worse? Is it staying the same? I mean, I would think in your position, you just would look at them and go, guys, I mean, how much do you have to do wrong before you get yourselves in trouble?
I mean, you're basing it on a big assumption in the first place, John. You know, if I lose my mind, that would assume that I had one in the first place. Right. I mean, I did take the job.
Yes.
Yeah, you're right. I've been doing this in Albany for over 40 years now. And it is frustrating. The ethics stuff in particular is frustrating. The tension always is that they're afraid, the governor and the legislative leaders and everybody else is afraid that if they create an entity that's too independent, it creates real problems for them. And so far, over the past decades that I've been working on this, they're much more willing to keep tinkering around the edges than actually just dealing with it and creating a truly independent entity. And that's what New Yorkers deserve. I mean, when it comes to ethical behavior, the money that they're spending is the taxpayers' money. It's the legislature's and the governor's responsibility to spend it right and not have any side deals that benefit them personally. And so the only way that the public is going to believe that that's working is if the ethics agency is truly independent, and it should be more independent even under the proposal advanced by Governor Hochul.
Yeah, my last thought, you hit on one of my biggest pet peeves in my end of the industry, is when I see a young producer in television anywhere, Albany, write a story that says Assemblyman so-and-so gave away this money. I'm always thinking, it's not his money, it's taxpayer money.
That's exactly right.
He may have the big floppy check in his hand, but that's our money and it might be being used for good, but you know, it's our money.
It never gets brought up. Governor Hochul likes to run around and talk about climate change and resiliency projects. We calculated over the past 12 months, she's attributed at least $1.8 billion, but it is taxpayer money.
Right.
And we'd rather see the oil companies picking up that tab instead of the public at large.
I think a lot of people would agree. Blair here on Horner, thanks for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
Let's get together again, not let 30 years go by. All right, the state's starting to see an increase in COVID-19 related hospitalizations just as the kids are going back to school. When we come back, we'll hear from a health expert on the steps that parents and returning kids are taking to stay safe in school this year. Also, if you have a comment or story idea, let us know about it. You can email us at news@news10.com. You can also reach out on X, formerly known as Twitter, at WTEN. Welcome back to Empire State Weekly. I'm John Gregg in Albany. As students head back to school, state lawmakers recommending familiar precautions to keep everybody safe from coronavirus this year. Governor Hochul's administration recommending the updated COVID vaccine following the CDC's approval for all New Yorkers 6 months old up and older. Now, the new vaccine targets emerging subvariants, this coming as the state is reporting increases in hospitalizations from COVID. It is important to note current members are not near the record highs that we've seen in previous years. Governor stressing that point right here.
This is not the bad old days at all. We don't anticipate getting there. But shame on us if we don't see the warnings, take precautions, be ready, and know that this can spread very quickly. So I'm calling on New Yorkers once again, as we have many, many times. Take the right precautions, and we can handle this.
Governor went on to encourage everyone to get their annual flu shot and to ask health experts about the RSV vaccine as well. Well, joining us now to give additional insight on keeping all those returning students healthy, Dr. Gina Madden with St. Peter's Health Partners, a Capital Region Health System. Doctor, thanks for coming in. Vaccinations, they've always been important. They're more important than ever right now, I'm guessing.
Absolutely. You know, when we think about vaccines, it's one reliable way to keep kids and adults healthy if we can prevent diseases that are around, for sure.
And again, when you're going to go to school, there's a whole battery of shots you have to get, right? That hasn't really changed that much?
It actually hasn't changed that much. The New York State required vaccines to attend school has been very similar for many, many years now. And so kids can always families can talk to their pediatricians, to their school nurses, to know exactly what they need and when they need them. But as a general rule of thumb, you can think about it kind of like there's the baby shots through a year and a half, pre-KK shots, and then kind of the 6th and 7th grade tween shots, and then 16 and 17-year-old shots. Those are kind of the three main school ages that kids might need vaccines.
And you mentioned the phrase talk to your doctor. That's important, not just, I would think, with vaccines. You could speak this better than me, but almost anything. You start Googling symptoms in a box and you're going to find out you've got 19 different terrible things that maybe you don't even have, right? I mean, and I worry parents might start going down these rabbit holes of some anti-vax things where suddenly they don't want to have any of their kids get any shots.
Right. I mean, I always feel like my role is to inform and educate and tell families everything I know so that they can make informed decisions. You know, we like facts, we like evidence-based medicine. That's what helps us make the right decisions and right choices for our kids to keep them healthy.
If a parent decides, you know, I don't want my kid to have shots, they're also putting other children at risk, aren't they, in terms of spreading, if their child goes in and is susceptible to certain things? Right.
Well, of course, you know, there are very few children, but there are some who can't receive shots for certain reasons, whether they have cancer and they're on medications because, you know, that might make them immunocompromised, or like rheumatologic conditions, same thing, medications that make them immunocompromised, or an underlying medical condition. Those children are always going to be vulnerable to those infections. So it tends to be that if you're unvaccinated against certain diseases, that often those diseases will cluster and come into spots where a lot of people are unvaccinated. For example, measles being one case.
Maybe I was asleep when this became a thing, but RSV, I'm hearing a lot about RSV. I don't remember hearing about this years ago. Is it something new or something that's always been around? And exactly what is it and why is it an issue?
Yeah, so RSV, or respiratory syncytial virus, is you know, it's a big deal because there's now some medicines we can give to help alleviate some of the really, really severe sickness that comes along with it. It primarily affects most severely kids under the age of 2, and particularly those with risk factors like prematurity, which we're having, a lot more children, in terms of their survival and ability to take care of children who are premature. That number has been increasing over the decades. So they're most vulnerable to RSV, and they can get really, really sick and require hospitalization. There is a new vaccine that should be coming out this year that can help those children who are most vulnerable, but it definitely tends to hit, as most diseases, most severely kids under the age of 2, and of course, sometimes the elderly as well.
Where are we with COVID? I know I'm starting to see numbers ticking up a little bit. I'm assuming that was expected as we get out of summer towards fall anywhere, where people are more indoor confined spaces. Are you seeing that at the hospital?
Of course, just like, we see the flu and RSV also when there's more congregation in the winter season. I expect, we will see more of that. Of course, vaccination is a great way to help reduce severity of disease. That's what we're trying to do. Same with the flu, reduce severity of disease, so less hospitalizations. There's been a little uptick in this region, since August, although we would still be categorized by the CDC, not at a medium or high level of hospitalization yet.
Are you recommending COVID shots for kids, or is that more depending on your age and your comorbidities and those things?
Yeah, so, any child over the age of 6 months can receive the COVID vaccine. You can think of it as it will reduce the severity of disease for themselves, but also it's, as a public health issue, may reduce severity of disease to people around them too.
What about people who think, or people or kids with their children saying, well, I got the COVID shots a couple of years ago. It's probably still in my system. I'm good. I know they're saying there's a new variants and there's new shots coming out now, but I'm probably okay. Should you be looking at the new shots anyway, just to kind of bolster things?
Yes, you should. Just kind of like the flu vaccine, how that changes every year slightly, the genetic strain. COVID does the same thing. And so, again, the bottom line with a lot of these vaccines is we want to keep people out of the hospital and we want to keep them alive, right? I mean, that's really the bottom line, as well as reduce the severity of disease. So the new COVID vaccine, which should be coming out in September or October, is a great way to do that.
Is it frustrating for somebody on your side of the fence, where I'm seeing now there's some longer term studies coming out saying, well, maybe masking didn't work as well as we thought. And you got some people go, aha, I knew it. So I'm not going to listen to anything these people say anymore because they were wrong about X, Y, or Z. Does that impact you trying to get through to parents? Yeah, everything wasn't perfect how we dealt with COVID, but we're here now and we do know some things, and certainly shots do work and vaccines work. Vaccines work.
They do. They work. And again, at the end of the day, I know for me and for my patients, I want to do everything I can. And, masking's in there, vaccination's in there, good ventilation's in there, all these things we want to utilize to keep kids healthy.
And last question, if a parent has a child that's not feeling well, where do you stand? Do you recommend dealing with the family doctor if you can, it's within hours, or urgent care, or I'm assuming the emergency room should be the last stop if you can help it?
Always call your doctor's office, because they always have somebody on night and day, and they can help you navigate about where you need to be seen. If they can see you that same day and you don't have a long wait in the ER, or if your symptoms are severe enough that you need more emergent care. But always call your office and get through to somebody, because that's what their job is, to help you navigate.
Talk to a human with a degree versus Google search box, maybe?
Definitely. Anytime you can do that, that's a good thing.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Madden,
of course,
for coming
my
in.
pleasure.
Health Partners. Let's hope we all stay healthy this fall and winter. Gun owners seeing a significant change in how background checks are working these days. When we come back, we'll break down the big changes and hear from some who call the changes unnecessary. If you have a comment or story idea, please let us know about it. You can email us at news@news10.com. You can also reach out on that thing called X, which we used to call Twitter, at WTEN. Welcome back to Empire State Weekly. I'm John Gray in Albany. Part of the new gun laws taking effect this week, changing the way gun background checks are being carried out and adding background checks for ammo purchases as well. Now, New York State Police will now be the ones in charge of processing those background checks. Gun retailers will also use a new website, punch in a prospective name, and the site will either approve, deny, or delay a purchase based on a list from the FBI. The new checks do carry a new fee as well, $9 to get a background check to buy a firearm, $2.50 each time you're buying ammunition.
It's a totally unnecessary thing. I think if you have a pistol permit, which I did, I passed all the background checks. There's no reason why I should have to go to a background check every time I want to buy ammunition. It's ridiculous.
The new legislation came about after the top supermarket mass shooting in Buffalo. A rising in the consumer price index is adding to concerns about inflation. Gas prices and other costs rising at the end of August across the country. According to the Labor Department, the consumer price index rose over 3%. The gain mostly because of the rising cost of energy. It's a sign that inflation is still persisting despite interest hikes from the Federal Reserve. One economic expert explains that while some may be feeling the pinch, inflation rates overall are actually heading. Stick around. We'll be back with a look at the week ahead in just a moment. If you have a comment or story idea, please let us know about it. You can email us at news@news10.com. You can also reach out on X, formerly known as Twitter, at WTEN. Finally on Empire State Weekly, after nearly a year of revisions, New York's final regulations are in place for the adult use cannabis market. The rules are set to shape now how the industry will run moving forward. In less than a month, the people across the state will be able to apply for the tiers of a marijuana license, from growing, distribution, or if they want to sell it. The regulations, however, not receiving universal praise.
A big deal at yesterday's meeting was a lot of talk about the registered organizations, or our medical marijuana organizations, their ability to enter into the adult use market, which is quite controversial. At the beginning of the process, there was supposed to be a 3-year wait for them to join the adult use market. And now it looks like they're going to be able to join at the end of this year just by buying their way in.
Some have raised concerns that this move will impact small businesses especially. Next week, we'll be talking with the Office of Cannabis Management on the new regulation rollout. For now, from all of us here on Empire State Weekly, I'm John Gray in Albany. We'll see you right here next week. And a quick reminder, don't forget you can watch Empire State Weekly all over New York State. Here's a full schedule of Empire State Weekly on 10 television stations across the great state of New York.